Hello and welcome to this session today where we'll be talking about how to automate reporting and analytics using external partner tools. Now, the Centrify Cloud platform provides a lot of reporting and analytics capability, dashboards, within the cloud administrative user interface to run reports and to provide different data visualizations. But I often get asked, how do I export that data to external tools? They may be external SIM tools for security, they may be analytics tools, reporting engines, etc. So while we do have some built-in connectors via Centrify, we can provide this data to virtually any external platform via the Centrify API. In today's example, we're going to be doing a little bit of API exercise, pulling data from Centrify and pushing it into the Google platform so we can leverage things like spreadsheets, analytics, and visualizations. So just to give a baseline, we'll start in our Centrify cloud environment where I'm logged in as an administrator. I can navigate to my reports tab and I can run a number of canned reports. We're going to pick for this example logins by country. I can specify a date range. We'll say roughly the past 3 days or so, and I'm able to get this report, simple report on which countries my users are logging in from. Now, if I want to go ahead and drill down onto what exactly this report's doing, I can edit my script editor here, and I can actually see what SQL is being used. I could copy the SQL and use it in other reports, etc. There's also a data dictionary here that describes the table schema so that you can effectively write SQL queries against the cloud tenant. So what I'm essentially going to do is take this SQL script and I'm going to incorporate it into a Python script where I can use the Centrify API to run this same report. So let's check that out. So if I look in my terminal here, you'll see that I have a Python script called logins by country, and I can open that up and you can take a look at it. There's not too many lines in here. I'm not going to bore you with all the syntax, but essentially we are using the Bedrock query interface to run this report, which the Python script puts together a request over HTTPS and calls this Bedrock query interface, and it gets back a JSON response. You can see here, as part of the HTTP request, I've actually included the script that we were just looking at in the user interface, and I go ahead and I create a file. Once I get the JSON response, this logins.txt file, and I basically just dump out the result set into the text file to be used later on. So let me actually back up out of here and let's test out our script. You can see our logins.txt has been utilized, and we're going to actually remove that so that we can verify that our script is still working. So we'll go ahead and execute logins by country, and you can see that I print out the very messy JSON response here. So in addition to simply printing it out, we can go ahead and take a look at the file itself. And if we open logins.txt, you can see that we've got a simple output for our query result set. Now we have our data pulled from Centrify, right? And we want to now push it into Google. So for our next step, we need to go ahead and move over to our Google configuration. So we're going to go ahead and navigate into our developers console for Google. And the first thing we need to do is we need to create a new project in the console. So you see, you can click here, you can add, create project. I've already created one called Centrify API example. Now, the next thing that needs to happen is you need to enable Google Drive API. So if you select the API library here, you can search for Google Drive. And if I click on it, if it wasn't already enabled, it would give me an option to enable this API. You need to make sure this is enabled so that the new project will allow access to Google Sheets, right? So we're going to be transforming this data into a Google Sheet, and Google Drive is what's going to store the Google Sheet. So let's back to our project, and we're back in our dashboard. Now the next thing that we need to do is we need to create credentials in order to access the this Google API. So if I click on credentials here, you can see I've already got some created. You could select create credentials. This is going to be for service account key. So I can create a new service account that's going to be used. I can call it service user 2. What you want to do with this service account, though, is you want to select a role, and that's going to be project editor. So this service account is going to have the roles and rights in order to access the Google Sheets in the Google Drive API, and it's essentially allowing the service user to edit the spreadsheet. So when I create the service account, I want to select key type as JSON, and then you can go ahead and create your credentials files. So you can see here that it says private key saved to your computer. It's a JSON file. We're going to essentially rename that one in a minute. So if I go back to my console here, you can see I've already gone ahead and renamed. Oh, let me back up a second. I've already got this file renamed, and that's going to be our client underscore secret.json. So you want to take that file that was just downloaded, and you want to rename it. For simplicity, rename it client underscore secret.json. Now, if we go ahead and we open up this file that was generated, you can see that Google created a private key for us, right? It is in relation to our service account user that we created. It's relevant to our project that we created. This is automatically generated, the private key. You'll notice that this client email is created, and this is basically a generic service user email. And you might think, well, why do I need this? Well, in order for the service account to access the spreadsheet, you're going to want to share this, right? So we're actually going to copy this email address here, right? I can copy it to my clipboard. I don't really care about any of the other stuff in this file, mostly just the email. So once I have that email, I can go back to my Google environment, and if you haven't already, you can create a spreadsheet. So this one already has data in it. Let me go ahead and delete everything. So we're starting with a new spreadsheet called Centrify API example, which is not the same as our project name. So here's where that email comes in handy. I can actually click share, and I can take that email from our JSON file, the client email value, and I can actually paste it in here, and I can share the spreadsheet with that here, and I can go ahead and hit send. Now I've already gone through this exercise, as you can see, so I'm going to hit cancel. If you notice, when I select share here, or rather when I hover over it, it's shared with one person, and that is in fact my service account that I created the credentials for. All right, so now the next thing we need to do is we need to do some installation here, because we're going to have a separate Python script for editing the spreadsheet. You'll see I've already gone through the liberty of creating this Python script. Some of the key highlights to note here is you're going to need to import a couple of these packages. So you're going to need to import the gspread package, and you're also going to need to import this service account credentials package. So if you've got pip installed, you can actually just do a you could do a pip install gspread OAuth to client, and you can see I've got requirement already satisfied because I ran this earlier. And then once those are actually installed, then as I was just showing a moment ago, you'll want to import these packages into your Python script. Okay, so the next thing you can see here, I've imported pprint. That would be relevant if you wanted to output the text to the console. In this case, we want to update the sheet itself, the Google Sheet. So if you don't care to output the results to the console, you can skip that. Now this part's important. This is going to be our scope, and we're going to need to go ahead and define this in order to basically give the proper access for our service user. And our scope is going to be https://spreadsheets.google.com/feeds. Now we're going to create a credentials object, and this credential object is going to be what leverages the key file name. If you remember the private key that was created as part of our Google configuration, we renamed this client secret JSON file. We got the email out of there. We shared the spreadsheet. But we also need to reference this file in order to create our credential object. Next, the client object, and this is what these packages that we're importing is essentially doing, is this client object is then actually using those credentials to put together an authorized client object, which can then make those calls to the API securely. So after that, we got to create a sheet, right? We got to use our client object, and we got to create a Google Sheet, or we can reference one that's already created. If you remember, I've already got one created called Centrify API example, and you see that I'm going to go ahead and use client.open to open the spreadsheet. Again, I've got this commented out because I am not printing anything in the console for this iteration. And next, what do we need to do? Well, we've got a logins.txt file, right, that we outputted from Centrify after running our query and getting our result set. So what we're going to do is we're essentially going to read from that file, and we're going to iterate through, and we're going to take each line, and we're going to do a sheet update into our spreadsheet. So really simple stuff. Just this is opening a file in Python, read write IO, and you're going to use the sheet object to actually update the cells. So if we've got everything pretty much in order here, we can go ahead and execute our Python spreadsheet script. And if I go over to my spreadsheet, you can see that my service account user via API is actually editing the spreadsheet. Pretty cool. So, a simple example, these obviously could get a lot more complex. But, if you think about having an application automate this, you can, essentially feed data from Centrify into external tools like Google on a regular basis. So, what can I do with the data at this point? Well, really, it's anything you want. If you want to create some visualizations, you can do that. I'll go ahead and make a simple pie chart, right? And do some analysis on my usage data, right? For access. And really, if you think of the data being a little bit larger data sets, a little more complex when it comes to security events and whatnot, then you can go beyond simply Google Sheets and charts. You can feed some of that data into Google Data Studio to come up with really big reports for things like security events or user behavior. And then because we've got this not in a database but essentially in Google Sheet form, you can apply add-ons to it. And one of the add-ons that is available among others is Google Analytics. So I could take my spreadsheet now that I've got this data, and I can go ahead and crunch some of these numbers depending on what my requirements are. So another cool feature there. So let's do a quick recap and just talk about what we did. Essentially, we pulled data from the Centrify API using the Red Rock query service. We dumped it into a text file called logins.txt, and then we leveraged the Google API. We created a project in the API manager. We added Google Drive API to the project. We created credentials. We created a service account. We assigned the role of project editor to that service account to edit the spreadsheet. We downloaded our credentials file, which was a JSON file. We opened up that file, we got the client email out of there, and we're able to share the spreadsheet with that service user email. Then we went to the terminal, we installed our gspread and OAuth 2 client packages, and we created a Python script called spreadsheet.py, and we imported our libraries in there. We created a scope so we could access the spreadsheet via API. The scope was spreadsheets.google.com/feeds. We created a credentials object. We created a client object. And we were then able to read from our text file outputted from Centrify with our login by country data. And line by line, we went ahead and made an API call through the Google API to update the Google spreadsheets. Then we were able to put some visualizations around our data once it was in the Google platform, and from there, that was pretty much it. So hopefully you learned something today. Hopefully you sparked your imagination about how this could be applied to other external platform tools. And hopefully it got you to see that there are really endless possibilities when it comes to pulling your Centrify data and pushing it into just about anything that has an API.